Guyana and Guyanese, at home and abroad. Tune in to Guyanese Morning Time, hosted by Kadaki Amsterdam, where the sun always shines. Guyanese Morning Time, the people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. We rise up early morning watching Comes TV, where wisdom and knowledge, yes, it is the key. Exposing corruption over land and sea, where the wicked politicians they try to trick me. Guyana is a land for everybody. With 6 races should live in harmony. It's one set of people getting aisle money. It's one set of people doing the thievery. Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. This is a program that you all can see. Sharing your views and your integrity. Like it, comment and share it all around. Pass it to your neighbor, safe and sound. A sad situation going on in this town. The voice of the people is getting trampled down. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, which has ordained me to sing. I sing Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, fooling the people. You're promoting evil. Stop lying to the people. You are a part of the cycle. Stop fooling people. You're promoting evil. Stop lying to the people. You are a part of the cycle. I say Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, they got Breakford, Bork and Mark Benchcop. David Hines and Kadaki Amsterdam. Sherrod Duncan, Nigel London. Normal Brown and Gavin Matthews. Big up Paslow, poor people governor. Simona Brooms, Robin Simpson. Hampton Green and Winston Jordan. And yes, we can go right on and on. Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again.
The relatives and friends of young Wyndham Bacchus, they deserve justice. The family, the relatives and friends of our in Boston, they deserve justice. The family, the relatives and friends of Peter Headley, they deserve justice.
And so when we say that Guyana is an apartheid state, we have the evidence to show.
Good night, then. bill, tell me morning. No, because you money, now you hustle for tell me morning.
Yes, morning, neighbor.
Morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, I don't want you conniving morning. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. That's all the money that me walk. A 2 pound note and a kill that piece. A 2 pound note and a kill that piece. A 2 pound note and a kill that piece. This is all the money that me walk.
I said, morning, neighbor.
Money, neighbor, money. Money, neighbor, money. Money, I don't want you conniving money.
Oh, Joseph.
Are you big and tall and feel left out? Well, Full Spectrum Boutique has you covered. Contact June 699-5947 for reputable brands in sizes that you also cater for the regular children and adults. Full Spectrum Boutique on 699-5947.
It's another change of magic as Keith Beresford and the Yankee Crew present their VIP Independence back-to-back oldies dance on Saturday, May 30th and Saturday, June 6, 2026 at the Eagles Nightclub on Rob Street, Georgetown, Guyana. Music by DJ Winky, Sly One-Man Band, Genesis One-Man Band, German Reinforced One-Man Band, and the Keith Beresford himself. Admission at the door only 2,000 Guyana dollars. Doors open at 8 p.m. sharp. So come on out and enjoy 2 nights of Magic Changes fun on Saturday, May 30th and June 6, 2026 at the Eagles Nightclub on Rob Street, Georgetown. This will be a night you will never forget.
You can get meat anywhere, but for the best cuts of chicken, beef, pork, mutton, and lots more, check out T&W Harris Butcher Shop located in the East Ramveld Market Meat Section. Call us on 609-7168. T&W Harris Butcher Shop for the best in fresh cut meats and lots more.
lasting splendor, all for years and lost holy, and the dawning of thy glory, o'er the long, long night is past. Oh, arise, triumphant, glorious, from the ashes of the past. Oh, arise, triumphant, glorious, from the ashes of the past. Guyana, oh, my lovely native land, more dear to me than all the world, I see what sun is strand. Pour down upon the borders, looking out upon the deep, the great Atlantic flowed into a fury. For asleep, at morn, at noon, or measuring the crimson sunset's glow, I love thee, I love thee, I love thee. Oh, oh, beautiful Guyana, oh, my lovely native land, more dear to me than all the world, I see what sun is round. Pour down upon the borders, looking out upon the deep, the great Atlantic flowed into a fury. Flowed into a fury. Asleep, at morn, at noon, or measuring the crimson sunset's glow, I love thee, I love thee, I love thee, Guyana, I want to serve my country. Guyana, beautiful, happy, and free. Guyana, let's cooperate with our government to help develop Guyana the free. Together, my comrades, we'll build a brand new Guyana, a country where all are equal opportunity. So let us begin now to show loyalty to Guyana by showing love and respect for all that it means.
My brothers, my sisters, we will live and die here together. Come on to one people, one nation, one destiny. For harmonious living, cooperation will be forever. In work and play as we live as proud Guyanese.
Guyana, I want to serve my country. Guyana, beautiful, happy, and free. Guyana, let's cooperate with our government to help develop Guyana the free.
Well, it's time we settle all the nations in the interior. Our natural resources are there in great quantity. And we will do farming and establish jobs by the border. With food so we could fill all Guyanese.
My greatest desire is to serve my country, Guyana, and sincerely help my Guyana to move along. Our government asks us that we study hard and we learn the things that will help Guyana to become strong. Guyana, I want to serve my country.
Guyana, beautiful, happy, and free. Guyana, let's cooperate with our government to help develop Guyana the free, to help develop Guyana the free.
Hi, hello. Good morning. Anybody here? Morning, are you morning? Welcome to another program of Guyanese Morning Time. It is 7 hours 29 and it is the 21st day of May in the year 2026. 5 days to your independence, 60 years, 5 to 60. How you been doing? How was it yesterday? How was it last night? How you doing? How you feeling this morning? How are you getting along with those second quarter goals for this year? Right? How are you? You know, your second quarter quickly running out there. Pay attention. So what's happening? How you been doing? What's going on with you? I see them people over the west side decide they're gonna strike. The minibus drivers and so on decide they're gonna strike. I know how long it'll last. Because Guyanese seem not to have the temperament to really stand up and be sticklers to what they want. But let's see how long that will last. And I support the strike. I support the strike. I believe we need some more strikes, some transportation providers and other service providers in this country. It's Mr. Jordan's morning, so I can't spend too much time talking about it. But what I want you to do is share the live, call a friend, tell a friend that we're on and we're ready to rock and roll. If my calculation is right, this is going to be the last day before independence that Mr. Jordan will be able to present to you. Let me see. Yes, good. Because independence is on Tuesday, right? Good. And you know, he has been bringing a lot of, I want to say, fun fact, history, a lot of insight to Guyana at 60. And so I don't want to stand too much between what he has to give you and what you have to receive. So the faster you share the live, the faster we will get the program on the road and the more information you will be able to get today before time is up. So do that. Share the live. Share the live. Please and thank you. I see a lot of people talking a lot of things about the dispute, I want to call it, dispute between the government and transportation providers. And I see a lot of people threatening to bully a lot of people. You know, I always say that my thing in this country is that we must test things in the courts. We must test things in the courts. Because idiot, big old jail, and now I see the short cook. And the presidents and Jackass Prince, and a whole set of them coming out and telling private business owners, because that is what taxi drivers and minibus operators are, how to run the business. How to run the business. And they're not only telling them how to run the business, but they're also telling them that if you don't run your business or we say you should run your business, we're going to penalize you. We're going to penalize you. And so I think it's Mahendra, the traffic chief name. Another clung added to the list as far as I'm concerned. It's telling people if we get complaints that you've been demanding your fares from passengers and you're refusing to carry people who don't want to pay your fare and so on, we're going to suspend your license. We're going to suspend your license. We got 3 persons we consider whether or not to suspend the license. I want to call it for what it is right now. Bullshit. That's why I see it as bullshit. And somebody needs to test the bullshit. I don't know that the, let me call them authorities, have any right any right to suspend somebody's license because, according to them, they didn't follow the instruction. As a matter of fact, I do not believe that. Well, I don't even have to believe. I should say I know that it would take the courts to suspend the driver's license. Those who know better or think they know better could perhaps shine me on the one. Here goes when come to the front of the class. It's the same thing I'm asking. For you to suspend a driver's license, he has to be in breach of the law. Which law? Who determines that he's in breach of the law? The police could charge him and put him before the court and let him answer to the court, and the court will make the determination. Yeah, it's going to be time wasting from where a lot of us sit. Yeah, it's going to cost some money, it's going to cost some time and so on. But I'm saying Guyanese have to bring themselves to the place where they are prepared to test the waters and test a lot of this nonsense, this abuse that the PPP and their friends are heaping on them. I believe in unity, there's strength. The minibus operators must come together and decide, listen, one of us going to test this thing. The rest of us will back him up. We're going to provide resources so that he can test this thing for us. That's how you get changes. Who wants to bail the cat? I going to bail the cat, all right. We're going to provide all that is necessary to bail the cat. Bullyism. We're going to suspend your license. Just say you're going to suspend license. Y'all give me a break. But I'm going to come back to the tomorrow's Free Talk Friday. Hopefully I get to talk about it tomorrow because I've invited Dr. Westmas, Nigel Westmas, to talk to us about the journey from a historical point of view to Guyana's 60th. Right? Remember, Dr. Westmas is the lecturer, let me call him that, conducting the Institute of Skills episodes in Guyanese history. So I asked him if he can come on tomorrow and, as I might say, give us an extended history. So we have some understanding even as we're going to celebrate the 60th independence anniversary. Okay? Share the life, share the life, share the life. Let me play the trade winds while I call Mr. Jordan. You know what? I'm going to play Singing Sandra. I think Guyanese need a good dose of encouragement to stand up for their dignity and die with their dignity. So let's play Singing Sandra.
Atera is the...
You know, at least I'm one of them who believe that I can die with my dignity. I ain't bowing, and I ain't going low. I ain't accepting a body. I care what it is, the president or president. The things a lot of people doing in this country in the name of survival is unholy.
You want to help to mind your family. You want to help your man financially. But nowadays it's really very hard to get a job as a girl in Trinidad. You're looking out to find something to do. You meet a boss man who promised to help you. But when the man laid down the condition, nothing else but humiliation. You want to see your whole anatomy. You want to see where your doctor never see. You want to do what your husband never do. Still you will know if this...
You know, I said I don't want to stay too long in between yourselves and Mr. Jordan, but listening to Singing Sandra, you know, sometimes I really believe, I like to say I'm led to these things when the mornings come. Listening to Sandra, as a girl to get a job in Trinidad, what you got to do. It is alleged, it is whispered that more than that, or that and more, takes place in this very country here. Not so long ago, two young Indian ladies or girls were overheard discussing an invitation to the Attorney General's home to discuss employment. Hey, hold on, let's get back to our music. Y'all could investigate that. pay to play. Y'all just listen now. What is my name? What's my name? I'm gonna tell you name. You just always come on the program and cost them. He said they asked his wife for sex for she get piece of land. Civic. I think it's Civic there that's calling, man. Right? Civic say that's how they just operate. They always want to see what your doctor can see for you to get something out of them. Two young girls discussing who had to visit, allegedly who had to visit the AG's home to discuss employment, and whose turn it is now to visit the AG's home to discuss employment. It can't get any better for some of these people in this country. Can't get any better. Let me play Sandra and let me call Mr. Jordan.
Camps will hire you. Well, if it's all this humiliation, to get a job these days as a woman, brother, they go keep their money, I go keep my honey and die with my dignity.
This weekend is the Spice Mango Girls from Buxton, Spice Mango International Girls Annual Carnival in Buxton, right? So y'all come out. They're starting at 12 o'clock and they're doing the village tramp and thing and so on and so forth. Come and have some fun. Come and meet up and greet up and hug up and love up and so on and so forth. Y'all come. Come support the thing. Okay? Please do. Thank you.
Some of them done pack up already. Yet they sit down, waiting like my PP, using the power of their cash and position, waiting to abuse and exploit any woman. To get the work, you have to go to bed with me. Become the slave, second wife and deputy. And as the next woman come on the line, he start to tell you you ain't good, you can't whine. They want to see you in some fancy man. They want to see how you look without your clothes. They want you cock up like a bloody acrobat. The wife at home, they can't ask she to do that. So before I got to live down somebody, or cause I let the police come for me.
Blackie,
Tell them they could keep their money, I go keep my honey and
good morning, sir. I'm well, as well as you can be. As I said, I like to say I'm well because if you say anything otherwise, nobody is there to help you.
You know?
So it's
I always
you
say don't tell them your
respond.
business when they can't help you.
Exactly, and even sometimes don't tell them your business, even if they could help you, because you don't
Because
know
they're
if
going
they're
to
going
take them
to
and make costs.
take them. Yeah, so brother, so once again, it's Thursday, and it's thankful Thursday. We got to always be thankful that we are one of the chosen who have made it through another week. As we know, quite a few would not have made it. And there is usually say condolences to their relatives and their friends and whoever else they've left on what port, and may their souls continue to rest in peace. And since we last met last week, Wednesday, I learned of the death of two people, not close to me, but known internationally. Known internationally. The first was, of course, Clarence Carter. Clarence Carter, another of the blind geniuses. Of course, we associate blind genius with Stevie Wonder, but Clarence Carter, in his own right, was a blind genius. He died last week, Friday, at the ripe old age of 90. 90. He is known for tunes like Patches. Patches, I'm depending on you, son, to hold the family true. My son, it's all left up to you. Oh, what a mournful, beautiful song. Every time I hear that song, it gives me goosebumps about the trials and travails of life, and it reminds you a lot about particularly the African, whether the African in the diaspora or the African in the Caribbean. It reminds you a lot about our foreparents, slaved to the mercies of the land, of the climate, of the environment, and still they persevered. Still today they are being persecuted, whether by the brutal whip or the whip, physical whip, or otherwise. Patches. And then, of course, he had this good soul tune, Slipping Away. And then there's another one, less known, but I know it quite well. It's called Stroking. And of course, Backdoor Santo. Well known for those tunes, best known for his soul and blues, and his music dominated the 70s when I grew up. And of course, the other death is of the infamous Mark Foreman, the detective in the O.J. Simpson case, who allegedly planted the glove that if it couldn't fit, you must acquit. The famous words of the known brilliant black lawyer, Johnny Cochran. May his soul continue to rest in peace. Yes, I learned that Mark Foreman, he died on May the 12th, age 74. Well, the wicked or the otherwise, may their souls continue to rest in peace. They have to make peace and make right with their maker, whoever they shall be. Today's program is coming to you from New York. Yes, that's where I am. And I so have to keep faith with my CAMS family and all those who are depending on me every Thursday for their inspiration and so on. I came up here for some business and health issues to attend to them, but at the same time, I had to keep faith with the program. So yes, it's coming to you from the Big Apple, beautiful New York, where the weather is scorching already. But we are Caribbean people. We are accustomed to hot sun. Sometimes not as hot as this. And because New York itself is a concrete jungle, the air doesn't circulate properly. So the hot air gets trapped and has nowhere to go but in houses that are built to retain heat. So if you really want to sweat without jumping up and down a treadmill or otherwise, you can turn off your AC and stay indoors. And before long, you will have to have a mop to wipe up the sweat that you will be sweating. Yeah, so I'm here for a couple of days now, and will be here for a couple of days more as I tend to different facets of my life. I left on Saturday. And because of the state of the road on the East Bank Road, I had to leave at least 4 hours before, right? So imagine on a weekend, you have to leave minimum 4 hours to ensure that you get to Timeri on time. There's no guarantee otherwise. The last time I traveled East Bank Road, to be quite frank, was last year, September. And between last year, September, and now, I don't see any, great progress that has been made on that road. I'm not sure what is happening, but I haven't seen any great, massive progress on the road. And what bothers me, for the progress that I've seen, and for a new road, because in a sense it's a new road. A road was there before, but it's a new road. You know when you buy a new car, there's that smell, right? There's that smell of a new car, and there's that look of a new car, and there's that feel of a new car. But there, you get no sense of even the work that they have completed when it's new. I don't know. There's something about building roads in Guyana that don't strike your imagination. Maybe our standards are so high after we got accustomed to the linden suits like highway, built way back in 1960, the late 1960s. When that road was finished, you thought you were in United States of America. You thought you were in Germany on the Autobahn or one of these places. But what they are doing, be it Ogle bypass road, be whatever roads they're making, it don't get you the sense that these are new roads. There's something that is totally missing. And you know what? Soon thereafter, they're patching like they're doing with the Ogle bypass. They're patching here, they're patching there, they're patching the South Rhine Belt road that they Barclay Street that they just finished. They said they just finished. And they're patching all over the place. They're patching on West Embararo. And that is how our monies are being wasted. But anyway, I traveled, I reached Timeri on time. Um, I'd advise people that if they have opportunities to check in online, they should do so, because it allows for the process to be smoother. Because once you check in your line and you go up there now, they don't have to do all this typing in and all kind of story. They just reaffirm certain information you put in there, and they print your boarding pass. In fact, we have to get to the stage where we can print our own boarding passes or have it sent to our phone. So all you do is turn up and you scan. I suppose one day we will get there. You know, so I finished there. Bear with me while I tell you my experiences. I like to talk about my experiences because sometimes they like to emphasize all this thing about technology and apps and public service efficiency and so on. But if you don't experience it, all this talk that they're making about, then it just remains that talk. All the money that they're spending on it. So I finished there, took my bag to the scanner as usual and so on. Then went to the immigration, where they're still having an immigration officer standing by the automatic gates or whatever, electronic gates or whatever you're trying. It seems these self gates are no longer self. You have to have assistance because like these gates don't work. All right. And that when I was there, I saw a red X on at least one of them, which means that one is not working. Okay. And so the immigration officer took the passport, put it on the scanner and so on, and then give me back the passport and said, go to the immigration officer because like it's not going through. Well, the technology has just been put in there. And the last time I traveled there, going as far back as last year, May, I also made the comment that these gates are a waste of time. They were meant to ease the work of the immigration, but they're like sentinels wasting time. There's a lot of money wasted because they're not operating in the same way that they operate in other airports where they are automatic. They scan your face or your eye or whatever the place may be. Everything comes up and the gates open. These ones here, these are what you call Guyana gates. They're Guyana gates because nothing much in Guyana works. They stand there like sentinel, giving you the impression that we're up there with technology. But in truth and fact, they don't work. Or if they do, they work for a short time. The next time you go wrong, you see out of order and so on. So let's get rid of these things until we are ready for them. I don't know what is somebody told me, some computer expert told me that they're not calibrated properly. If they're given that kind of problem, they're not calibrated properly or whatever it is, But until we get the expertise and so on, let's waste all this money that don't result in improved efficiency. Let us do the old-fashioned thing. Go up to the immigration officer. All you have to do now is train the immigration officer all right, to not ask all of these questions or ask or have or go through all of these things that they go through. Can you imagine when the airport meets 1 million passengers or whatever they have to process? Are the immigration officers going to use these same old techniques that they are using? I said it again. As it relates to citizens, you have to treat your citizens like citizens, that they belong to a country that you belong to. So when a citizen is leaving, you don't need to ask them a whole set of questions. You don't need to ask them a set of questions. All you need to ascertain is that they completed the online immigration card. You ascertain that, you stamp the passport, move on. For me, that is let us say 1 minute, if you want so much. You don't need to ask any more questions. None whatsoever. Just give the person back the passport and say, have a good trip. It's a 1 minute process. It's not a process designed to give any extensive power to the immigration officer. That is a citizen. Once and it's a good thing that you could sign up online. Once you sign up online, that information is fine. Your passport is there. Pop, stamp, move, have a good time, move on. You don't have to go through all these things, spending 3, 4, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, and all this kind of stuff. You don't need to ask the person anything. If it's a tourist leaving, you just maybe take a minute more or two to make certain that they don't violate any laws in terms of staying or so on. The passport is on and so on. And again, you move on. For me, we have this kind of power that is given to these people. They already have the power, but they must be able to use the power in that carefully calibrated manner. It's not a power to be thrown around and so on. You have the power, but you must be able to use it. You must go and learn from the various visits that you may get, and that those people themselves travel, and they see how people operate, how a place like John F. Kennedy Airport that has to do thousands upon thousands of passengers every day at one single airport, at one terminal, like say Terminal 4. Big jets are landing all the time. And you could see how they move with efficiency, because they have different ways of profiling and so on and so forth. I know we ain't got to do those thousands and so on, but we have to develop that efficiency. But anyway, you get past that. And you go now to security. Well, that is the one that made me really, ticked off. Because I don't understand why we still got to take off our shoe, a most insanitary action that has already now been discontinued in America and different places. I don't understand why they still ask you to take off your watch. Somebody thing, a little cheap thing and so on, that has been discontinued in many other places. I don't understand why they tell you to take off your belt, all right? Because my pants, I have lost some weight, and so, and I'm wearing my same size pants, so it's the belt that keeps them up. So when you ask me to take off the belt again, you're asking me to declothe and disrobe, which is almost what happened, because I had to take my hands and hold the pants up. That caused a little bit of fiasco, because when they put you into that boot or whatever they put you, until you put your hands up and over your head and so on, the pants literally fall down. I should say figuratively rather than literally fell down. I don't understand why they actually take off your belt when America and all these big places have stopped doing that, gone past that. What happened? Time has stopped still in Guyana. But the kicker for this all is then after they ask you to go through this scanner or whatever it is, in which it acts as an X-ray, because it scans your entire body. They see everything inside except, well, I don't even know even if it's except your private area. They see everything. They maybe see what the doctor don't see, as Singer Sandra says. And after all of that, when you come out of that booth, I checked it. Every single soul is patted down. Every single soul is patted down. So I told the security officer, I said, friend, what's the purpose of the scanner? Because I stood up there and watched everybody who passed through. He said he's doing his job. Well, what is his job? Is this his job to pat down everybody who come through the scanner? Well, then don't let us waste time with the expensive technology if you're going to pat down everybody who comes through, regardless where they come through the scanner. Get rid of the scanner and pat everybody down. Get rid of the scanner and pat everybody down. You know, it was laughable sometimes. He's doing his job, and very often sometimes you still see people go through there and end up being caught in a JFK. Was he doing his job? And all this doing job story, all the people going through the VIP lounge don't get pat down, don't get scanned. All the people who go into VIP lounge. And it's not only VIP people who go to VIP lounge, by the way. So they got to look at that again, because it's a distraction for tourists especially. If the scanner is not working, then tell everybody they got to get pat down. Story done. At least they're going to understand. But when you know you've gone through the scanner, where the scanner scans everything, even your private parts, it's scanning. And when you come down, man telling you still got to pat you down. That is a part for me that is going to discourage. They ain't learn yet. Maybe the scanner is not working, but they're only mama guy. But that's one of the areas, some of the areas they got to look at if they really want to encourage tourists to come. The other observation I made when I was there is that, you know, Mia Motley had told us a couple of years ago when she came to one of those conferences that was held around February or whatever, one of those oil conferences, that we will become tenants in our own country. And I have a feeling that time has already arrived. Because when I looked at the combination of people at the airport who were leaving on Saturday, I tell myself, does this country really belong to me anymore? I mean, I saw a significant number of people who looked Spanish. And I'm not talking about Venezuelans. They looked to me from like Santo Domingo, Panama, Peru, Ecuador, you know, and such countries. And they're obviously here legally because they're going through the airport. If they were illegal, they won't take that chance. And they're probably working in various areas, like in the mines, in the gold mines, you know, all these gold mines that are being talked about every day. And I'm going to do a program soon on that. They're probably working in all the different oil affiliated businesses. They're probably working in retailing, merchandising, housing, construction. But they were numerous. And then, of course, they were the Chinese. And then they were, of course, the Europeans. And on that day, you had all kinds of flights going out, Santo Domingo, KLM, you know, all of these different flights. I asked myself, are we tenants in our own country already? Is it our country still, especially on this, leading up to the 60th anniversary of independence? Are we really independent? If this is the level of dependence that we are looking at, and if we have so many workers in our country, of which that seemed to be a little small subset, what of the thousands of people leaving school and the thousands of people leaving university every year and the hundreds who are leaving technical institutes and so on. What of those? And I'm talking these who are qualified ones. Are they getting jobs? Is there a migratory policy? Is there a labor policy? Because it seems to me there's no labor policy. All I'm hearing about is how the Guyanese don't like work, or the Guyanese got this attitude and that attitude. Everybody got the attitude, including Americans. It didn't stop Trump from saying no illegal Mexican or whoever is going to work here and get a job over an American. It is always said the Americans lazy, they want to cut cane, they want to go in the fields, they want to pick cotton out. It didn't stop Trump from saying America first. But now you're hearing a government that is encouraging this attitude where employers, local employers, turning their nose and their faces up on Guyanese. And their first choice now is a foreigner, is a Spanish, as they call them. That's their first choice, a Spanish. And then asking afterwards why crime going up, particularly petty crime, and why the crime is associated with younger and younger folks. And you're still asking why people got to buy one tennis roll and a spoon of butter. It's because income is not coming into those communities and those homes. And it's not because those people are not being employed. Spanish has taken over. Spanish have taken over. And you continue like that, and they're going to understand how it's going to react. That was my concern for a country on the 60th anniversary. Everywhere you go is a Spanish. Even in little mom and pop stores is a Spanish. You're telling me Guyanese don't want to assist? Why? Because you can pay them slave wages. You can pay the Spanish slave wages. You just learn about the Indians, the 38 Indians. Is this what the government encouraging? Slavery, indentureship all over again? Turning a blind eye to it? Because that's what is happening. Nobody looks after the Spanish, the employment of the Spanish in this country, or the Chinese, or the Indians, and so on. And people are getting so bold in the trucking. The government has not come out and helped the truckers. Even though the Chinese saying, we don't want to employ y'all because y'all ain't got attitudes, work ethics like we have. Now, since when the government is going to encourage that such a thing? Since when? And encourage is what they have done, because those truckers, those Chinese truckers, got duty-free trucks. And many of them came in and got duty-free because they were doing government projects. And they then turned those duty-free into other projects. I know that. I'm aware of that. We had to stop several of them when I was minister. They came in to do certain government projects. And meanwhile, they were taking the same duty-free stuff that they got for the government projects and were bidding for projects in the private sector. I got the evidence. But this is what the government is encouraging. Unfair competition. Unfair competition, because the Chinese say Guyanese ain't got the work ethic like they want. And we left it at that. But that's the observation I made, and you could go and you could try it on any given day, coming out or coming in at the airport. Look at the people, the kind of people that are coming in, and then look at the economy and see whether we have now become tenants in our own country. But that is for another longer program that we probably will do. Because for me, independence, 60th independence doesn't stop on the 26th of May. It continues throughout. this year of 2026. And then, of course, generally, to conclude this part, for an airport where we have spent over 200 million US dollars and continuing, because it seems that there's forever a never-ending building that's going on at the Timir International Airport. The airport, it doesn't give you a vibe. In many ways, it looks drab. You know, the paint already start peeling. They got you got various facilities that don't work or don't work properly. In other words, then, we don't, first of all, there's no architectural presence of the airport. When that loan was taken from the Chinese, of course, that we knew, that we only heard by the way that it was announced in Jamaica, there was no design or anything for the airport. So what you're now getting for over 200 million US, excuse me, what you're getting now is a piece here, a piece there, a very structure, with a piece adding on here and a piece adding on there. And oh, I remember I got to do a piece down there. So you got that. You got that. And they got a facade where they put a little Guyana colors and so on. But it doesn't have presence. The airport doesn't have presence. It doesn't strike you as wow. It doesn't have that wow effect. Now we're hearing there's a terminal 2, and that one will have the wow effect. Right? But for $200+ million US dollars that has been spent so far in that airport, it's a waste of money. We should have got better, because I've seen airports that have been built for less, terminals that have been built for less, and have superb architecture, superb facilities, and so on. Right? Aside from the 6 air bridges that juts out, where it's only a few of them that they're using, the airport doesn't have much going for itself. And a long runway, the airport doesn't have much going for itself. And you know, it's the continuation of the waste of money that takes place in that country. When you got money, you complain. When you got money, you don't know what to do with it. And that is, Guyana is the classic, typical example of a country awash with money, but don't know how to use it and how to manage it. And so you're going to end up with things like the airport. Over 200 million US dollars spent on that airport. And look at what you have. Look what you have. I see New York have built over the airport at LaGuardia, the terminal at LaGuardia, right here in New York. They've built over or done serious work to different terminals, and you could feel the presence of the improvements and so on. But I don't know, as I said, in Guyana, where a lot of money is spending, and the feel, the wow effect, you don't get. I mean, there are a couple of buildings around the country that you could see something went into it in terms of the architecture and so on. But generally, you don't get that feel that Guyana is modernizing, as they would like you to think. So that was my experience coming out. And of course, New York will be New York. I think what is taking effect right now is the inflation, right? That force came from the tariffs, right? The imposition of those humongous tariffs, and now the oil. And so that combination is taking a toll on the prices in the supermarkets, on the prices in the malls, and so on. I could not believe some prices that I've seen, And while places like Walmart and so on remain the poor man's go-to. Even that is beginning to be outside the reach of the average person when it comes to certain things, because there's nothing cheap anymore in the Walmarts and the Targets and the so on. Some of the prices are you know some of the prices, and I could compare the prices because, like I said, I've been coming to this place since 1982. My first trip to United States was in 1982. So over time, I've been able to compare prices. I was telling a friend the other day, this was yesterday, when I first came to New York, to go in the subway, I used to use a token, right? And the size of the token was the exact size of the Guyana 25 cents. And Guyanese and the ingenuity. Suddenly, the people found a whole set of 25 cents in their token box when they opened it, right? Guyanese were literally riding the subway free because they're putting in these 25 cents. And of course, it evolved from the token, and then they went to these cards and so on, and now they're on this omni thing. But a ride now in the subway is $3. $3. From my 25 cents days to $3 is a ride. And for us pensioners and so on, that is a lot of money for us coming here to visit. It's a lot. That's $6 for a two-way ride in one day. Going one place and coming back. That's $6. And while $6 may not mean much in Guyana, even if you convert it, because it will be roughly just over $1,200. $1,200 may get you a cheap meal in Guyana. But $1,200 is a lot of money, especially for people who buy one tennis roll and a spoon of butter. So it's a lot. It's a lot. The prices are very high. Inflation is very high. Gasoline has gone up to $6 or something like that. And it's not great management of a very powerful economy. But New York will be New York. One good thing about it, the life is still there. And I guess people will have to redouble their efforts if they want to continue enjoying the perks of it. So okay, so last week I gave you my tidbits on continued my tidbits on independence and so on. And two things came to mind. I got a call. Well, first of all, I'm really thankful for the feedback, wonderful feedback, and people obviously love what I was doing as it related to that. Wonderful feedback. And I got a call from a dear friend of mine. Didn't hear from him a long time. Was my neighbor. I suppose he still is. I'm not too sure where he is today. Malcolm Paris. Malcolm and his brother Michael, they're twins. And Michael used to be teaching at UG. At the time when I joined UG, he was in the sociology department. And Malcolm, who's an economist in his own right, master's degree and so on, he was with, I think, Ministry of National Development at the time. Good party, man. Yeah, and I got a call from him. And he's now call me Master. And he said, Master, how you doing? I'm listening to your program, the recording of your program last. And he says, it's not Gwen Paris, it's Evelyn Paris. And, right away, I said, every time I was saying Gwen Paris, I was thinking, is it Gwen? But it's not Gwen Paris, who was the announcer on Radio Demerara, or GBC, Guyana Broadcasting Corporation, but it was Evelyn Paris, who is the wife of Malcolm Paris. Evelyn Paris, right? So Malcolm, I first of all, I enjoyed your call, and I'm thankful for the correction. It's Evelyn Paris. But there is a Gwen Paris also, but not in radio broadcasting. And the reason why her name was in my memory is because Gwen Paris was the Registrar General of GRO, Guyana General Register Office. Gwen Paris for a long time. Tall, stately woman of impeccable character and integrity. You know, those kinds of public servants that came up in the mold of a Joyce Sinclair and so on. Yes. And yes, so Gwen Paris, I understand she's a blessed memory. Yes, so I knew her well. I knew her well, and she used to come to budget meetings and so forth. Knew her well. As I said, very kindly, stately woman of integrity and the kind of public servant, you know, in the mold of the Joyce Sinclairs and so on. Yeah, so thankful for that correction. And you know, his call, Malcolm's call, reminded me of the one that I did, I think it was last week, continued last week on University of Guyana on the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Free Education from nursery to university that was done on the 1st of May, 1976 by none other than the great Lyndon Forbes Sampson Barnum. And it dawned upon me that should look at the contributions, or at least recognize the various ministers of education through the years who would have contributed to where many of us are today in terms of their policies or the government's policies and their programs, you know, and their whole approach to education. Each one with their own stamp on it, you know. And even in the case of UG, well, even before we got to UG, there was Forbes Barnum, the earlier part. Forbes Barnum was at one time Minister of Education. And another tidbit is that at one time Forbes Barnum was also Mayor of Georgetown. You know, I think a while back I was talking about John Ford and being Mayor of Georgetown and the John Ford Car Park and so on. Yes, Forbes Barnum was also Mayor of Georgetown at one time. But he was also Minister of Education in the short-lived 1953 government, PVP government, headed by Cherry Jagan. At the time when I believe also Forbes was also chairman of the party. But after 133 days of that government, the British stepped in, the government was suspended. The British stepped in and removed Cherry on the understanding that he was too far left or was going too far left, and he was a communist. All of that is part of the history that is being told right now. And none other than David Hines, I think on Monday gone, had a really good program on the independence and the independence movement and so on. And he might have had highlight. I didn't stay around long for the program, but in the early part when I was listening to it, he was giving us some great information on the independence movement. And he might have talked about that also. But it was Forbes Barnum as Minister of Education who created 2 additional scholarships. Because at the time, there was only one Conquest Scholarship. One, and it was fierce competition for it. A lot of bright people then and now. But with only one scholarship, only one person can get. And given the fact that all education at that time was paying education, Without that scholarship, it was difficult to move on. If you check, a lot of people during that time did correspondence courses, right? Their first degree was a correspondence course. Desmond Hoyt, I think his degree in economics was via correspondence. And there's some others. I don't know if Forbes also did one, but a lot of them would have done courses by correspondence. And the correspondence schools were highly, not these things where they got many of these things that they got here, something deemed university and all this kind of story where they think. Those were caliber education, caliber. So when you got a degree or certificate or whatever via correspondence course, it was well recognized. It was well recognized. And I recall even as a correspondence course, when you had to write exams, you had to go at a certain institution, whether it was at the Embassy High Commission or an associated building of the High Commission of the British or so on and so forth. Not these things where they got these days. Not these things. You know, I will continue to remain highly suspicious of many of the so-called correspondence degrees that people are getting, especially the ones that got to do with PhDs. You know, Guyana has produced more PhDs in the last 3 years via these gold programs than all the PhDs earned by all the Guyanese over decades. You mean we had so much locked away talent that now these gold programs and correspondence programs are unlocking? But that's for another time. Yeah, so back, it was Forbes Burnham. It was Forbes Burnham who created this 2 scholarships, additional 2 scholarships. And what would you believe? One of the 2 scholarships that he created was won by none other than Walter Rodney. It is a scholarship that was created by Burnham that allowed Walter Rodney to proceed to university to complete his first degree. I don't remember who's the other one that won this scholarship. I know David Hines might have dealt with this subject before, especially when at his eulogy for Rupert Roopnarine. And I don't recall whether he indicated that Rupert might have won the second one. I'm not sure, but I'm sure that information is available. And even when I was dealing with radio also, remember when I was dealing with radio? One of the reasons people kept radio was to listen to the various politicians and the speeches that they made. But none other than Forbes Burnham as Prime Minister. When Forbes Burnham was addressing the nation and so on, people will be glued to the radio as if they were listening to a test match cricket. Because, you know, people, as a little boy, when you got to be sleeping, we had a little pocket radio that I used to sneak and put it on the pillow. And when my parents sleeping and so on, I would turn it on to listen to the Australia versus the West Indies, because I know this come over late in the night. Australia versus the West Indies, and listening it until I fall asleep. Only to find out in the morning when the battery is either gone on low or the battery dead. You know what's going to happen afterwards. Yes, but people used to keep radio, listen to these national events and so on, but none other than the addresses of Burnham. Every radio in the house, in cars, in the market stalls, pocket radio, gram, anything, people used to be huddling around to listen to the address to the nation by Forbes Burnham. And sometimes people say the only other event would have had people doing that huddling and having the radios glued to the ears or surrounding them is, of course, what I talked about just now. You know, the test match cricket, right? England versus West Indies or Australia versus West Indies. Or even a boxing, international boxing that might have been broadcast over the radio that would have involved, say, Muhammad Ali, right? And of course, Bonham's other contribution to education, because Bonham did quite a bit on education. And I remembered in 2019, it was when at his anniversary at the mausoleum on August the 7th that President Granger did an exposition on Forbes Barnum's contribution to education. In fact, he said that Forbes Barnum's contribution to education was peerless, and I would say priceless, also, right? So the great Lyndon Forbes Sampson Barnum. Another minister of significance was Cedric Nunes, who was Minister of Education and Social Development in the Jagan government. And why was he of consequence? It was because in February of 1963, it was Cedric Nunes who presented the state paper called Memorandum on Higher Education in the Legislative Council. This paper was widely debated and finally resulted in the University of Guyana Ordinance number 63 being passed in April 1963. It is that piece of legislation that created formally the University of Guyana. Okay? Then the University of Guyana started business later on that year in 1963. But it is Cedric Nunes who will be credited with taking that state paper to the Legislative Council, and that resulted in the University of Guyana Ordinance number 63 that was passed on April 19th, 1963. Of course, other ministers of education through the years were Brindley Benn, I think from 1957 to 1961. He was Minister of Community Development and Education. And of course, that was the ending of the PPP years. All right, so the PPP years had Forbes Barnum, Brindley Benn, Cedric Nunes. And then the PNC years began with Winifred Gaskin, 1964 to 1973. She was Minister of Education, Youth, Race Relations, and Community Development. After Winifred Gaskin, you had Shirley Field Ridley, then Miss Cicely Baird. Miss Cicely Baird went on to become Pro-Chancellor of the University of Guyana. And her signature is also on my certificate. So we have her as Pro-Chancellor, Dennis Irvine as Vice-Chancellor. Can't remember who was the registrar. You can come back to mind. Right. Then, of course, after Cicely Baird, there was Jeffrey Thomas, who also served at one time as Minister of Home Affairs. And if I remember well, I don't know whether he also was at one time Minister of Youth or something, but definitely Jeffrey Thomas, Minister of Education, around the same time that Ranjit Chandy Singh. Ranjit Chandy Singh was Minister of Higher Education. So while Jeffrey Thomas was Minister of Education in the period 1980 to 1985, Ranjit Chandy Singh was Minister of Higher Education during that same period of 1980 and 1985. And of course, that is where my good friend Malcolm Paris also comes in as Minister of Education. He was Minister of Education, I think, somewhere between 1984 and 1985, Malcolm Paris. And you also had Viola Burnham, who was the Vice President and Minister of Education and Social Development, right? So she was from 1985 to 1992. She would have been she was like the Minister of Higher Education, kind of also at the time when also Malcolm Paris was going to be the Minister of Education. And that was the end of the period of the PNC, 1992, of course. And then, of course, the period of the PPP started, right? Their first minister in the post-1992 was the Reverend Ramnath Dale Bisnath, the least favored of my ministers of education. He will be the end of the totem pole. You know, some people have this appellation of reverend and all kind of thing, but you know, let's leave it at that. He was Minister of Education and Cultural Development. After him, you had Henry Benfield Jeffrey. He was Minister of Education from 2001 to 2006, followed by Sheikh KZ Bash, 2006 to 2015. And that ended the period of the PPP post-1992. Of course, the coalition government came in 2015, and Rupert Rupnaraine was made Minister of Education, and he served until between 2015 and 2017. And Nicolette Henry, who was serving in his ministry at the time as a junior minister, she was elevated to Senior Minister of Education. And she served until the coalition government was booted out in 2020. And in came the PPP again, and this cycle started forth with Priya Manik-Chan and the one who is the minister at the moment. Priya Manik-Chan, no child left behind, and now you have Sonia Parag, who was from 2025 to the present. So I thought I would give some credit to those who have been responsible for our education through the years. And I know they would perhaps thank me for recognizing them. All right, so on to strict business. Time always goes when you're having fun. So there's so many things to talk about, so little time to do it, I always say. But one of the first things I want to look at today is this whole business where President Ali went to a GBTI's 190th anniversary dinner at the Marriott Hotel Georgetown. And he made a number of announcements. He said that Guyana's banking sector is preparing for a major shift with a new real-time payment system set to go online on June 2nd, 2026. He also said that he also announced that Guyana had licensed three international financial institutions to operate in Guyana. Well, for those who don't know, that would have sounded like, wow, Guyana is on the move and all this kind of story. Yeah, But I thought I would do again what I had done before to give substance to this whole business about what they're calling licensing financial institutions and so. But I will use the opportunity at the same time. So this will be done in three parts. One, let's talk about this business about 190th anniversary of GBTI. Then we are going to talk about the national payment system that he talked about that will go online, that will allow this app to go online. Then we will talk about these three licensing financial institutions. Because one, two people also call me again and ask for clarification. I don't know why they're calling me and ask me for clarification. I'm not in government. That's just being said. But I consented to look at them closely and then to give you my answers today. So here goes. So let's talk about this GBTI 190 years. Doesn't it surprise you or shock you? What is GBTI talking about 190 years anniversary? Has GBTI been in existence for 190 years? I myself was taken aback. 190 years? As far as we know, GBTI was a just come, Johnny come lately institution in the banking sector. So where did they get this 190 years from? So apparently, they're tracing their roots from the colonial bank, right? That was set up in British Guyana in May of 1836. So you see where the 190, when you add 190 to 1836, you'll get 2026. So they're tracing their roots to the colonial bank that was established in British Guyana in May of 1836. The operations of the colonial bank was continued in what is known today as Barclays Bank PLC, Public Liability Company. You understand? So the colonial bank, the operations of the colonial bank were continued or subsumed under Barclays Bank PLC, a British bank, Barclays Bank PLC. As you know, Barclays Bank, headquartered in United Kingdom, had a local branch here, right? For you who don't remember, Barclays Bank had a branch right there where the GBTI headquarters is in Water Street. And then they had another branch in Camp Street where the GBTI also has their branch. The local operations were nationalized or taken over by the PNC government in June 1984-87. So the government acquired this Barclays Bank operations, and the newly acquired operations was open to the public as the Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry, or GBTI, on December 4th, 1987. So GBTI really should have its anniversary on December 4th, 2026, when it will be 39 years old. 39 years old. That is what GBTI is. The bank GBTI is 39 years old. Barclays Bank operates in other institutions, other countries, in addition to United Kingdom. And their Barclays Bank trace their roots to the colonial bank, not GBTI. GBTI must trace its roots from the captured local operations of the Barclays Bank that was taken over by the government in 1984-87. Tell me about no 190th anniversary. Who believe that GBTI is 190 years old? December 4th this year, GBTI is 39 years old. That is what they are. And you know why what I'm saying, makes eminent sense? Because At the same time, Guyana, the government, the PNC government took over Barclays Bank's local operations. They also did the same to two other operations. The Chase Manhattan Bank. Chase Manhattan had a branch in Guyana. For many of you who don't know, Chase Manhattan Bank used to operate in Guyana. They had an office downstairs of the Bank of Guyana building. That's where they used to be. And that Chase Manhattan Bank, the operations were taken over by the government. And that bank was renamed Republic Bank Guyana Limited. But Republic Bank Trinidad objected to the name. And so the name was changed to Republic Bank Guyana Limited. And the first general manager was my friend John Tracy, who used to work as a manager at the Guyana National Cooperative Bank at the time. And he was taken from GNCB and taken to manage the operations of this newly acquired Republic Bank Guyana Limited. But by January the 4th, 1990, this new Republic Bank Guyana Limited, the operations were merged with the Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry Limited operations to become the expanded Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry Limited. So finally, they got rid of Republic Bank Guyana. Those operations were subsumed under the Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry Limited. If I remembered well, the first general manager of the GBTI now was a lady named Margaret De Silva. And John Tracy became the deputy general manager of GBTI. So when GBTI is saying that they're tracing the roots of colonial bank, it's not true. It is Barclays Bank who can trace their roots to the colonial bank, not GBTI, because Barclays Bank still exists. They still exist. They can trace their roots. GBTI got to trace their roots to the takeover of the Barclays Bank local operations by the then PNC government. And then they're subsumed operations of the Chase Manhattan Bank. So why they didn't trace their history to the Chase Manhattan Bank, since since Chase Manhattan Bank operations locally were subsumed under GBTI. So as far as you're concerned, GBTI will be 39 years old on December the 4th, 1987. 1987, yes. And so they'll be 39 years old on 31st of, sorry, on the 4th of December, I'll keep saying 24. On the 4th of December, 2026, then they will be right. And if we want to continue the history of GBTI, in 1991, so they operated as a government entity or a public entity up until 1991. Another, let's call it, say, a government type entity, because shares were sold afterwards in GBTI. But in 1991, GBTI was eventually privatized. Privatized in the sense that a private holder owned more than 50% of the shares in GBTI. In fact, as it said, the private holder whose name was Secure International Finance. They own 61% of the shares. And Secure International Finance is owned by the Bihari Group. That is why Bihari owns, I think it's 70 or is it 80% of the whole GBTI, and 20% is left to shareholders, what they call minority shareholders. But the minority shareholders might be minority in holdings, but not in number. The minority shareholders hold the greatest number in terms of people who hold shares, whereas the GBTI group on the secure international holding, they hold the greatest holding in the group. And then to complete the government's exit from the bank completely, that happened in 1994 when the government sold its remaining shares in GBTI to the same secure international finance, right? So the government had a 30% share left, and they sell it in 1994 to GBTI. You know, let me give you a fun fact. So Asghar Ali was the Minister of Finance at the time, and there were liquidity issues in the country and so. So Asghar Ali convinced his government, headed by Jagan at the time, that the government should issue $2 billion in bonds in the hope that people will take out our little monies would have got under the bed and so on and so forth and come and buy these bonds. So they put the first $1 billion out to the public to bid for it. Here's the long and short of the story. The bonds were bought by one person, GBTI, or a subsidiary of GBTI. $1 billion bond, $1 billion they put up. 1 billion. Why? This lucrative bond was put out there, 2 years maturity, 20% per annum interest rate, tax-free. So GBTI walked away with a cool $400 million in 2 years tax-free. A cool $400 million. By that time, the Jagan government decided not to issue the second $1 billion. Well, I know why, but figure it out. Right? So they walk away with a cool $400 million tax-free. It was perhaps, they should write a book. The best piece of investment that could have had at that time. $400 million tax-free on a $1 billion investment over 2 years. Wow. Anyway, that's just a fun fact. So that is the history of the GBTI. They're not the issue right now. They're the issue of the GBTI. Of course, just to complete this here, I said the government nationalized 3 banks at the time. So you had Barclays, you had Chase Manhattan, and of course you had the Royal Bank of Canada. Right? The Royal Bank of Canada. The government then nationalized Royal Bank of Canada. The Royal Bank of Canada was sold to the government for $1. Right? And that bank then became National Bank of Industry and Commerce, NBIC. Right? And NBIC, the holdings of NBIC, after NBIC was stripped of whatever debt. No, first of all, GNCB, the rump of GNCB was absorbed into NBIC, and the debt was sent to a debt collecting agency called GCFS, Guyana Cooperative Finance Services. It was housed in GNCB Sports Club, which is now being built over under my stewardship there in Crowell Street. And the profitable rump was sent to NBIC. And then NBIC was sold to the Republic Bank of Trinidad. So that's how you have Republic Bank there, right now there in Water Street and all its different branches and so on. So that is a bit of a history. I've done this banking history before, but I thought I will remind people. And I was a bit tickled, not rankled, but tickled that GBTI claimed that they were having a 190-year anniversary, when in fact we all know, or at least old staters like me knew, that GBTI was only created in the 80s when the government started nationalizing or taking over a number of these operations and creating its own bank, GNCB, because GNCB was a precursor to what subsequently happened. When the PNC government could not get the then banking system to assist in financing national development, it went and opened GNCB, right? GNC, Guyana National Cooperative Bank, and started diverting savings to GNCB, right? All those, many employees had to open accounts at GNCB and have their salaries paid into their account at GNCB and so on. So the writing was on the wall for foreign banks in Guyana. And as you could see up to today, there are only 2 foreign banks in Guyana and 1 regional bank. The 2 foreign banks are Baroda and Nova Scotia. They weathered the storm. And the regional bank, of course, is Republic Bank. Yeah, so that is that on GBTI. The next part of this exposition really is the one to do with this whole thing about June the 2nd being earmarked as the time when this real-time story will go online. It says the FastPay is a real-time payment system that will go live on June the 2nd, 2026. It was developed under the National Payment System under the supervision of Bank of Guyana. And it will allow customers across participating banks to send and receive funds instantly. This, of course, was made possible, or is going to be made possible, by the sweeping changes that were made to the legislative and infrastructure foundation of the financial system. See, people think that this is something that happened overnight, you know, or this is something that is associated with the PPP, but it's not. And that is why I wanted to set the record straight, okay? Because as far back as 2018, and you know which government was in place and in power in 2018, the coalition government, of course, of which I must take some kudos, we set out a national payment system vision that was articulated in the National Payment System Strategy. And the intent or the vision was to build a robust, safe and sound, efficient and inclusive national payment system that met the current and future needs of the economy, supported financial activity and financial sector development, advanced the use of electronic payments, contributed to financial risk mitigation, achieved compatibility with international systems, and adhered to the relevant international standards, guidelines, and codes, right? That was the vision of our Guyana National Payment System. Efforts to put in place a reformed national payment system began in early 2015 when a diagnostic exercise was conducted. The World Bank, of course, assisted with some level of financing and technical assistance to support the payment system modernization program. And this was in late 2016, right? This was late 2016. World Bank gave us some assistance to flesh out this new national payment system and its modernization. A national payment system bill. I piloted a national payment system bill in the Parliament along with 4 supporting pieces of regulations that address 1, electronic funds transfer, 2, agents, 3, electronic money, and 4, oversight. This was Bill number 4 of 2018, and it was called the National Payment Systems Bill. When it was passed, it became Act number 13 of 2018, the National Payment System Act 2018. And of course, there was a commencement order bringing it into force. It was called the National Payment Systems Act 2018, commencement order 2019. So I wanted to put that in the public domain to let people know that this is not something that the PPP just wake up and then going to give you a splash on June the 2nd and attribute it to the PPP. The architecture of that, what is going to happen on June the 2nd, ultimately, was put in place by the coalition government. And as I showed you just now, all the legal infrastructure, all the different supporting pieces of legislation, and so on, all of that was done under the coalition government. So when June the 2nd comes and you see it, put up a finger for also the coalition government, because they're not going to mention the coalition government. They can tell you it's spring like a beanstalk overnight under their government. All right? So now you know, as Shani Olivier, or Oliver as she says, now you know. And then, of course, the third part of this business that he talked about is the licensing of 3 financial institutions. You know, we spoke about this last year when they first came out with the noise about licensing 3 financial institutions. Because people get the feeling, oh, well, finally we got these major banks out of America coming to Guyana. That is not so. I said last year that is not so because they're fudging the issue. And I'm telling you again, it is not so. I'm going to go into it in some more detail this time. So last year, if you all remember, out of the blues, of all the priority things we got, out of the blue, the Minister of Finance took a bill. Well, let's give him the long name. The senior minister in the office, the president with the responsibility for finance, took a bill to Parliament called the Financial Institutions Amendment Bill 2025. And that bill sought to license representative offices of financial institutions, license and regulate the operations of financial institutions, representative offices of financial institutions in Guyana. Okay? So what is this representative office that we're talking about? Under the Foreign Financial Institutions Representative Offices Regulations 2025, which accompany the Act, the Financial Institutions Amendment Act of 2025, a representative office is defined as an office established in Guyana by a foreign financial institution through which no banking business of a financial nature or other business activity is carried out in Guyana other than 1, promoting the services of the foreign financial institution or an affiliate of the foreign financial institution other than an affiliate incorporated in Guyana. Or 2, acting as a liaison between clients of the foreign financial institution and other officers of the foreign financial institution or its affiliates, other than affiliates incorporated in Guyana. The regulations go on to say that an application must be made and a fee of $1 million, non-refundable, is to be paid on application by the foreign business entity to set up a representative office in Guyana. If approved, then the representative office must pay $3 million registration fee to get a registration certificate to operate in Guyana. And that registration certificate is valid for 1 year. The certificate can be renewed at the instance of the government. And if it is renewed, another $3 million has to be paid. Okay? Section 10.1 of this same regulation says, quote, a representative office is prohibited from conducting any business activities relating to A, accepting deposits. Now, you know that is the lifeblood of any banking operation. So a representative office is not a bank. It's just that, a representative office. So a representative office cannot accept deposits. B, it cannot open accounts of any kind for clients. C, it cannot extend credit to any party. D, it cannot perform and or participate in any other normal banking operations. And E, it cannot deal in foreign currencies or securities. Okay? It's just a representative office. It is not the bank. Now, in 2029, in 2020, you must ask yourself, how is it that a growing economy, massive amount of money floating around, they said people tripping over each other to get investments here, and a large amounts of American investment, Canadian investment, British investment, all these people are coming here. And yet, not a single foreign bank has shown any interest in laying down roots in Guyana. Why is this so? All they're doing is setting up representative office to test the waters. To test the water. That's what they're doing, testing the waters. Why do they have to test the waters when so much money is swimming in Guyana? When so many American investment, all the things are here, shouldn't that be a reason for them to gather up, saddle up, and come and lay down roots in Guyana? No, they're going by representative office. And to do that, they get the government to upset its own parliamentary agenda, to rush a bill through, a bill that wasn't on the parliamentary agenda, to rush it through last year, to license representative offices under the fancy name that they gave the bill called Financial Institutions Amendment Bill 2025. But in essence, that bill is the bill that allows representative offices to function in Guyana. And so, way back in 2025, August, around that time, you heard Landela rush out. And he's the first one who announced that Bank of America and Citibank will be establishing representative offices in Guyana. And that is when people got excited and says, finally, we're going to get. And so people start asking, what happened to Chase Manhattan Bank? Because a lot of Guyanese over here, in New York, they bank with Chase Manhattan, and Chase Manhattan has been good to them and blah, blah, blah. And then I had to go out on the same camp, Stevie, and tell you a representative office is not a bank. It's not a bank. It's the lowest in the totem pole of banking activities. Representative office is the lowest of them, with the least powers. So he said that in 2025 that Bank of America and Citibank will be establishing ROs in Guyana. He didn't say, he didn't give a timeline or anything, but he said they will eventually. So now you're hearing from President Ali at this 190th anniversary, so-called 190th anniversary of GBTI, that they have licensed 3 financial institutions, when in fact now you know they are really representative offices. And he named these 3 as Citibank, whose name was mentioned in 2025. Crown Agents, how many of you knew that Crown Agents had a bank? But when we last correspondent banks in America, it is the Crown Agents Bank that we turn to as correspondent bank. So he mentioned Citibank, Crown Agents Bank, and One American. I bet y'all figure that One America might be Bank of America, but you can soon find out it's not so. This One American came out of the blue. And y'all might have thought it meant really and truly Bank of America, or they might have been affiliated with Bank of America, but it's not true. Absolutely not true. While all y'all know about Citibank, who is this One American Bank? Well, like I said to you, One American should not be confused with Bank of America. Should not be confused with Bank of America. Because One American Bank is a privately held commercial bank that was founded in 1883 and headquartered in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And it was originally named Bank of Centerville. Bank of Centerville. So this is a relatively unknown bank who wants to set up a representative office in Guyana. So all I could tell our folks is to find out more. Because again, as you've got to keep asking, why aren't there more, Bank of America, Chase Manhattan, why aren't they expressing great interest in laying down roots in Guyana? Especially since Chase Manhattan was here before, right? And of course, Bank of America has done a lot of business with Guyana. And we have had accounts, project accounts and so on, opened at Bank of America. Then, of course, there's this Crown Agents Bank. Who or what is Crown Agents Bank? Since they are now being introduced to Guyana, right? Very little is known about them. They're now being introduced to Guyana. So who's Crown Agents Bank? Crown Agents Bank is a UK regulated bank providing financial services through specialist foreign exchange, cross-border payments, trade finance, and treasury management work. That is what Crown Agents Bank is, and it's a UK regulated bank. It's headquartered in UK. It's owned by Helios Investors Partners, whatever that means. Helios is kind of Greek, yeah. Helios, Greek, Investors Partners. Okay. Now, Crown Agents, who used to be in Guyana for many years, and they were the British Procurement Agency for a long time. They were in Guyana for so long. I remember the guy who used to head the office in Guyana. He was around a long, long time until Crown Agents closed their office in Guyana. Interestingly, Crown Agents was placed into insolvency on the 4th of August 2024. That's just a, by the way, fact. That Crown Agents itself was placed into insolvency on the 4th of August 2024. So, like as Shani Oliver says, now you know. Don't get confused with all these financial institutions are coming in and dropping big names like Citibank and so on. They're not coming. All they're doing is setting up representative offices, testing the waters without having any affiliation with the country or without setting up roots in the country. So you're going to still have to depend on your overseas friends and so on to get whatever international transactions you want done, because it's going to be a while yet since these banks make up their mind if they wanted to come back. In the case of Chase Manhattan and the new banks, as to whether they really want to establish roots in Guyana by putting down offices and so on and getting involved in the real banking business as we know it. So that is that. Of course, the other major issue I wanted to deal with today, but because time is very limited, only another 15, 20 minutes max left, is this whole Jagdeo produce enough or pay more story. So again, I'm going to have to leave that. And I'm going to use the what time remains to quickly deal with some eclectic issues. And that first one is the most topical of them, which is the transportation increase, the fares for which the minibus drivers gone on strike. I think at least the Puerto Rico minibus drivers gone on strike. You know, we have dealt with this matter on numerous occasions. Numerous occasions. The government comes out with its usual antics about enumerating all the good things that they have done for the sector, removing excise tax, removing this tax and duty free, and all these different things they enumerate. And the government still don't seem to understand. You have done all of that, and the sector is still in a mess. And the transportation sector is not the only sector where you keep enumerating what you have done, and yet still you're having these problems. You have that in the gold sector. You have it in the aircraft association. They've given the aircraft association everything they wanted, and still the fares were very high. And on the trips, they were told to reduce their profit margins. And some of them sheepishly went and claimed that they reduced it. And I asked the question a couple months ago, how will you know when they increase the fares back? Because they're claiming they're still holding the profit margin, but prices went up. The government is at sea how to deal with the cost of living in the country, at sea. Well, what can you expect? What can you expect? On the one hand, you got the Ali telling people, cut the profit margins. Is who he talking to, government? He could tell Guyana to do that, and they will do it. But is who he's speaking to when he telling them cut the profit margin? I asked the question the last time. Does he know the profit margins of these people? And does he know whether they are in a position to cut margins? In one of the other things I hope to deal with that $20,000 story, there is a guy in there who showed a detailed calculation of what he had to spend, his costs, and what was his profit. His profit was thumbnail. And he was hoping for the best while he was getting this thumbnail profit. People might have thought he getting this huge thing profits and so on. He showed it in detail. So when you asking people to cut their profit margins, are you aware of their profit margins? But this is the kind of foolishness you get. The other foolishness you get Is Jagdeo telling people when they complain bitterly about the Chinese that how it's competition? It's a free market. That's the word he uses, free market competition. And they will have to either shape up or ship out. That is what he was telling mom and pop stores fighting against the juggernauts of the Chinese. But when you got these foolish things masquerading as policy, you expect these sectors to operate smoothly? You have no transportation policy. You're resisting bringing in buses, big buses, because now you have the money. Last year, I think, or just the year before, Barbados was in receipt of 100 big buses from China, hydrogen air-cooled buses in China. I was on Facebook yesterday reading a girl who is, she ain't got nothing against big buses, but here's her problem. Big buses are going to take long for full up. Big buses ain't going to stop in front of your house, whereas minibuses stop in front of your house. Not realizing that minibus stopping in front of your house is lawless behavior. Lawless behavior. But she's happy with that lawless behavior because big buses going to have to stop at bus stop. That's what she said. Big buses going to have to stop at bus stop. Do you know that minibuses are supposed to stop only at bus stops? But she said out there, oh, big buses too big. They're going to have to wait to fill up before they move off. Where she heard it from? Where she heard it from? I see Rahamon, who had owned the yellow buses back in the day, in the 70s, early 70s and so on, the 60s and the 70s. Rahamon, those buses used to work like clockwork. They didn't, how much people you got in there, that is it. You move off according to time, not according to when it's full. Unlike a minibus. A minibus doesn't move off until it's full. Not a big bus. A big bus works with time. Then she complained how we got roads for these big buses. Lady, they had big buses before we had these roads that we got now, right now, which they're claiming now is double lane and triple lane and so on. We had big buses running them little fine place long before we had big roads. And what kind of big roads you got in Barbados? You could barely think you got to put big mirror for stop when you want to come on the main road because it's so narrow. But they survive. But every excuse will be made not to introduce public transportation. Every excuse will be made, even though public transportation doesn't compete with private transportation. They're two different animals. They serve two different purposes. Two different animals. But you know what is particularly galling about this? They can show you no law that legislates the fares of minibuses. They can show you no law that legislates the fares of water taxis. And definitely there is no law that regulates hire car fares. None. All of these things are based on brute force. Brute force. Because as they said, as the one in Manibus said, the Consumers Association or the Ministry of Trade used to get together and call them, and they will go through and try to set fares. But setting fares are just recommended fares. Unless you legislate those fares, they are just not recommended fares. And it's not Jagdeo who claim it's free market. So how is free market? And now you're telling people they can't regulate their own fares in face of massive increases in prices. How are you telling them that now? Free market, it's free market when you feel like it. Unless you regulate, unless you bring minibuses and their fare structure under the Public Utilities Commission, or unless another law, you can't brutally force these people into a fare structure. It will only be a recommended. It doesn't have the force of law. And all you're doing is threatening them because you know that you can't lock them up for charging a higher fare. You will take away a license because a license is not or they're not a license, but the authority to run the route. You may take that away because I don't know whether that is legal or whether it's a gifted something or so on. But unless you show them the law that says you must charge $10, then everything else is just a gentleman's agreement. But as you said, it's free market. So if you have a gentleman's agreement, but I want to charge above it or below it, then it's free market. It's free market. Now, I'm not in the saddle of the minibuses. I am in the saddle here of what is right, what must be policy. They said it's 10 years that those prices are there. I'm the one who came here and said, when they removed all the taxes from the gasoline and all this kind of thing, the fares never went down. I'm the one that said when the gasoline was cheap, the fares never went down because the people then saying, oh, yes, the gasoline might be cheap, but the other parts that are not cheap. And I agree because I got a car and I know parts aren't cheap. But under the PNC, when they had price controls and suggested prices and so on, they used to meet. I remember at state planning, we used to meet every so often and engage the minibuses and the taxis and so on, and go through their cost structure and their profit margins and so on, and come up with a suggested price, which they would be happy with. You have to have a scenario where prices and fares and tariffs and so on can be reviewed once every X time. As just like how in the international organizations, they review salaries once every 3 years based on a survey of comparator organizations. You can do the same thing. Say fares will be reviewed once every 3 years after assessing cost structures, changes to cost structures, and so forth. But you can't tell me I must run a minibus for 10 years. 10 years at the same price. And of late, you're skyrocketing price increase in prices. Many of those minibuses, you have to run all over the place to get certain parts, or the parts got to be imported directly, which is more costly than if the parts are brought in by a distributor, because he will bring in many parts, whereas you got to bring in one part specifically for that and so on. The downtime of minibuses when they have to wait for parts is very large. As I said, I'm not rooting for minibuses, but you have to take all of that into consideration. You're worried that increasing minibus fare is going to have an impact on consumers. It will always. Consumers are feeling impact in every other area, and you can't do a thing about it. Even though you claim how you take off tax here, you take off tax there, and all kind of story. Now, I saw a suggestion made by David Patterson. I'm not going to say much about the suggestion, but I think the suggestion, while I know it's made with the best of intention, it's not going to solve the problem. Well, it's not going to solve the problem because, first of all, you do not know what is the cost structure of these minibuses. So to just come out and say a $25,000 monthly fuel voucher will assist, definitely it will assist. But by how much? By how much will they have to reduce the fare as a result of getting a $25,000 voucher? You cannot know that unless a detailed assessment is made of the cost structure. You can't determine whether it's 25,000 or 10,000 or 15,000 or 50,000 unless you know that cost structure, number one. Number two, you have to be able to do a quid pro quo. This is what the government's not doing. The government is keep coming up with these lazy arguments, but I reduce excise tax and I reduce this tax and so on without having a social contract with the users. You have to say, okay, I'm going to give you this X 25,000, usually $25,000 voucher in return for fares being this level going forward. And you have to enshrine that in some legal framework, because if there is any adjustment to it, then you must be able to carry the person to court or something. Or if you don't have this price, then we're going to pull the voucher. But pulling the voucher is not going to do much. You have to have some legal way of doing it, some contractual way of doing it. You just can't give away all the excise taxes and all this kind of thing and have people still demanding increases without you understanding what is the cost structure. So unless they sit down with the minibuses, it is clear that some level of increase has to be given. And the government must stop thinking that because you got oil money, that they will absorb that increase and then for the sake of the fares remaining the same. That is not how economics works. Every time the government absorbs an increase, it sends a signal to the market. A different signal than the one that wants you to adjust to the new realities. And there's only so much money in the Natural Resource Fund. Already you're running a budget that got a massive deficit. Already you're running a budget that is claiming 90% of the resources at any given time in the Natural Resource Fund. So you can't just continuously run into the Natural Resource Fund that ain't got much money left to solve problems that every other economy will solve using the tools that are available to them, the policy tools that are available to them. You can't play father and grandfather to every sector in this country. You wake up overnight, the rice farmers complain, boop, take $3 billion. Fishermen complain that the fish swimming away, boop, take 1.5 billion. You like father giving out taxpayers money to favored sectors. And other sectors are looking on. That is what the minibus people are saying. You're bailing out rice, you're bailing out sugar, you're bailing out all these different deficit areas. But what happened to we now too? What happened to we? It's going to happen. You can't run an economy like that. You can't run the economy on that basis. Money is finite. Money is a finite resource. You just can't wake up overnight and say, oh, we got a natural resource fund. Let me do this and let me do that. You're encouraging marginal farmers. On the one hand, you're giving out these $3 billion. Then you got Mustafa running out and saying exactly what I said last year. And trying to come after me is the wrong person you're coming after, and you'll find out sooner than later. Y'all is trying to hide these things in the name of votes and other issues. But the reality is you can't continue encouraging marginal farmers to plant marginal lands while they're inefficient and then turning around and giving them monies because you cost livelihoods and so on. The same farmer, look, you got so much shortages in Guyana of fruits and vegetables and that kind of thing. Encourage the farmer to diversify, help the farmer to diversify and buy the produce from the farmer when they reaping, rather than turning around and giving them a fish in the form of these continuous subsidies for plant rice that you can't sell, that you can't mill, that you can't store. But once the farmer knows that once he puts pressure on you, the government, you're going to come with your gift basket. $3 billion here, $2 billion there, and so on. What is his incentive to diversify? What? And the mini back to the minibuses. The minibuses now have captured transportation in the country. Captured. And I understand and I don't appreciate that certain people who own these minibuses and so on are big up in the government and in the security forces and so on. And so there's very little incentive to make the changes. But if a select few people is going to capture entire nation, heaven help us as a people in this 60th anniversary. Heaven help us as a people in this 60th anniversary. So what is the solution to this problem? Meet the minibus. Meet a delegation of the minibus. Let them put their cost structure out. Sit down with top people. You got your finance secretary and all them. Let them sit down with a representative group. Let us see the cost structure over a period. Substantiate this with visits to typical parts stores and so on. And then come up to a decision. They have to have some kind of increase. You as a government can't fetch that increase. Come up to a decision with a review over every 3 months. Because once the war is finished, and if prices begin to moderate, there may be some reason why you have to readjust the fares. And the minibus people got to be aware, made aware, that once situation returns either to normality or near normality, they can expect that we will come back and the fares will have to reduce. But that's how you do things. You don't put a sledgehammer to hammer them and tell them this. They are doing exactly what they're doing because you are not responsive to their need to survive on those routes. You're not responsive to them. And to the minibus people, look, Guyana approaching 60th is perhaps in worse shape than in 1966. I read a long letter by Christopher Nascimento, Kit Nascimento, I think it's in today's papers. And he's talking about the PPP achieved some level of the 36 seats because people voted on policies and so on. Ask the average person what policy they voted on when they voted PPP. Ask them and see if they can be able to tell you. Me, when I read letters like those, is go through, like they say, is go through one and come through the next. Because quite frankly, especially the person who's writing, you always put a question mark. You always put a question mark. Minibus, you have to vote your interests. You have to vote your interests like everybody else. You all got to vote your interest. If you don't vote your interest, then you will be in. And as I saw David says, if you make yourself grass, you'll be eaten by cows. And that's what y'all have been doing. Many of y'all have made yourself grass, and the cows are eating you. You're not a constituency like the rice, who can wake up one morning and put pressure on the government and then get $3 billion. So you got to make yourself like the rice. And you have to demand, like everybody else, you got to demand a seat at the table. Because if you don't have a seat at the table, you'll be part of the meal. And that's what many of y'all are, part of the meal. And this is just the beginning of what is going to happen in the other sectors. Because we seem to want to bring out an inflation or a pricing that bears no relationship to what is going on in the real world, in the real Guyana. We seem not to want it. It's all good politically to hide the real situation. But in hiding it, and since you know the real situation, you should be developing policies to attack what you know, not what you put out there on the surface. Who on earth believing that Guyana got 1 point something percent inflation, annual inflation, or 2 point something or whatever? Who believes that? Who believes that? Because you want to use that to give people the impression to suppress wages and all these kind of things. Well, it's not working. Chickens coming home to roost, and eventually people are going to wake up. But for me, they got to go to the next step. Vote your interests, not your race, which is what, unlike what Christopher Nathan think, is what people continue doing. Don't tell me about how many crossovers and all them kind of story that they have, and so forth. That don't tell. But as I said, that is a different discussion for a different day. So Kodaki, I think we come to the end of this here. It's done 20 minutes to 10. I don't want to use up much more of people's time. All right, so until next week, God spare. Goodbye.